Hello, our friend.
Hello, my friend. Do you come in the love and the light of the one infinite creator?
We do, as do you.
Yes, I do. Thank you for asking.
Very good. We would just like to share a couple things.
Please do.
We know that we have spoken about this conflict that is occurring in between our country, Russia,
And Ukraine.
and Ukraine.
Yes.
Yes. It's spilling over, as has been depicted by a few of your news networks.
Yes.
It's going to continue.
To spill over?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the expansion into Poland is going to create great strife within the conglomerate of countries that are a united front.
Yes, we call that NATO.
Yes, yes. And so that's not going to be tolerated very well.
Right.
And so this is going to cause, potentially, we don't know, we don't predict the future, but one potential timeline is that it's going to escalate the tensions within that region.
Mm-hmm.
And other countries such as yours and the other European countries are going to kind of be pulled into it,
Right.
whether they want to be or not, because they are part of that NATO
Right.
alliance.
Right.
And so we see a potential for a much greater escalation in warfare and atrocities amongst one another.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that saying that you have history repeats itself. This is kind of an example of that,
Okay.
because it starts in one focal point
Uh-huh.
and then it spreads.
Right.
And the portal for service to self has increased.
Okay.
And they're the ones that are driving this to some degree.
Right.
And they are escalating this because what they are doing is they are putting thoughts and ideas out there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's incumbent upon each person to reach out and grab them.
Right.
But the majority of the populace doesn't have the awareness to recognize it as being detrimental to their own people as well as their surrounding neighbors.
Okay.
And so what we see potentially down the line is one good potentiality is if these borders, divisions between places,
Mm-hmm.
if they would dissolve and people could just exist as one unit,
Mm-hmm.
then they would be more inclined to be compassionate and kind to one another.
Okay.
This is far down the road from what we see, but we like we said, we cannot predict the future, so we don't know. But if that could happen, then it would de-escalate situations like this,
Mm-hmm.
where it's, this is mine, this is yours, I want this, I want what you have. And so that would greatly diminish.
Right.
But that's going to require an increased awareness upon the people. But
Right.
it's fear that is keeping individuals stagnant
Mm-hmm.
and in place,
Mm-hmm.
and which is leading to more and more atrocities.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the atrocities that have occurred in Ukraine and spilling over into Poland have not been discovered yet.
Okay.
And so there's more to be disclosed. And so those individuals that have agreed to those situations to be injured, killed, tortured, lots of torture going on.
Mm-hmm.
So once that becomes more disclosed, then hopefully that will be a stimulus for the populace to stand up and say no more and do something. But
You're talking about now the population of Russia.
Russia and Ukraine.
And Ukraine. Well, Ukraine is standing up, are they not?
They are.
But they're in a defensive position.
They are in a defensive position, but these atrocities are still occurring on small little levels here and there.
Localized.
Yes. So they're being underreported and underdiscovered because they are just a little pocket here, a little pocket there. So your people with the cameras,
Media.
aren't necessarily paying attention to these little things, but when you put them all together, it's like a big ball.
Right.
And once that ball gets rolling and people become more aware, they will stand up and do a little bit more to their capabilities. But the fact that their power, water, just basic necessities to survive, especially with winter coming, is greatly diminished. So their energy level is diminished to resist.
Right.
So
That's the intent of the demolition of the resources for energy and food and so forth.
yes, and those it will take some great time, as you know. This isn't news. Change all of that to upgrade and rebuild.
Right.
But that's difficult to do given the white stuff on the ground, the snow, their weather situation.
Yeah.
And that's going to cause great difficulties for their people with this snow coming in and the cold. And so they're kind of frozen in place.
Right.
So they will have great difficulties over this upcoming season where your planet rotates.
Right.
And it becomes darker and colder for that region.
The focal point for the service to self escalation is from the portal that is in Russia, and I understand it's not exclusive to that. I'm sure it would be of interest to all of the portal sources on the globe, but the primary focus is coming from the Russia portal. Is that correct?
Yes, because from the sand countries, the Middle East, as you call it,
Right.
activity there has slowed because a lot of those entities that had easy access into that region of the world are going over to the Russia country and influencing them, and the populace there is unaware. But not that they don't want to be aware, but they are just deprived of knowledge, deprived of news, of world events.
Yeah, they're isolated within the country.
Yes, they're very isolated. However, if they did have the knowledge, then things might be different.
Help me understand a little bit about portal and how it works. A portal, if my understanding is correct, a portal is opened by a fifth density service to self entity. The fourth density does not have the capacity yet to establish a portal. Is that correct?
Yes.
But the purpose of the portal is to funnel an avenue for infiltration by fourth density service to self.
Yes.
Numerically, fourth density service to self is greatly superior than to fifth density. Fifth density, if I understand correctly, is not that directly involved with the influences to a population.
Yes, fifth density is more concerned with preserving its own self.
Right.
And so therefore they are not inclined to share information or work together. They've become further and further separate from the creator and further separate from each other.
Right.
So they're out for their own.
But there's a hierarchy within fifth density service to self,
Yes.
is there not? Okay. So we have in our little corner of the universe, if my understanding is correct, we essentially have what we would call possibly a regional manager of service to self. That's a fifth density, but the majority of what they're managing are the fourth density.
They manage both.
Okay, they manage fifth density lesser stature than they are.
Yes, because fifth density is already sort of on that track to achieve that status, if you will. And so they're already on that track, so they require less supervision.
Right.
So because, how do we say this? We'll use your terminology, brainwashed
Right.
into that pathway. Then they're kind of like a herd. Like a herd of sheep.
Now this is fourth density you're
Fifth.
speaking of?
Fifth.
Yes, okay. Fifth,
So,
okay.
yes, fifth. So they're sort of like herded like sheep,
Mm-hmm.
but they agree to that. Everybody has to agree to the path that they're on.
Right.
And so that sort of fifth density keeps getting shifted further and further down this path to
The further down the path, the more myopic their perspective becomes.
yes.
Okay.
They lose less, they lose compassion, they lose the ability to love another, to help one another, because that's not their goal.
Well, if they skip the opening of the fourth chakra, then they perceive love to be folly, and so they would have virtually no compassion, no caring for another other than how that other being can aid their own progression. Is that correct?
That's correct. They fear love because love requires setting aside part of your ego,
Surrender. Yeah.
part of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so in doing that, you have to become vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, they perceive that as giving up control, power, dominance over another.
Right.
And they perceive that as weakness.
So everybody, and when I say everybody, every being other than your perceived self becomes a competitor.
Yes.
Okay. But the direction, and help me understand how they introduce their thought control to a third density population. How do they direct thought to maintain their domination and subjugation of a population?
The easiest way for them to do that is through external sources like your TV.
Mm-hmm.
So the images that are projected on the TV are a great way for them to reach the populace in a fast manner.
Mm-hmm.
Your magazines
Okay.
with the pictures and the writing, the articles.
Mm-hmm.
So there are multiple mediums that they use to influence the populace in an efficient and quick way, because they know that your populace thrives on that.
Mm-hmm. But there has to be entities that are incarnate within the population in order to implement that objective. Do they not? Is that not necessary?
Not all the time, no.
Okay. So how do they recruit, other than mass media as you're describing now? How do they plant the seed within the populace in order to allow it to grow and metastasize?
They typically target individuals that are of high status in your society, that are easily manipulated by money.
And they're susceptible to immediate gratification
Yes,
responses.
by money, wealth, things, which are transient.
They all have a very strong ego.
Yes, that too. And so they slowly feed that ego, like giving a baby food all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for example, that baby depends on that food and it wants it more and more and more.
And this extends over multiple incarnations.
Yes, it does. And it only grows bigger with each incarnation, because it starts off at one with just, we'll use the baby example again for whatever, it's simple. 1 spoonful of applesauce. Then the next incarnation is 2. Oh, I like that. Then the next incarnation you get 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get more reward for behaving in a certain fashion.
And all of this it stimulates and reinforces their false ego, their false perception of self.
Yes.
Okay.
Because their ego absorbs it and thinks this is real. This is that I feel good because I have this power over other people, and I can control them, subjugate them. I can basically do whatever I want. And so it's an incremental process that is very calculated. And that's how they gradually increase their populace to become service to self. our channel's a little bit tired. So that's how they project their ideation.
Okay, so the inducement of a incarnate individual is done through experience rather than direct thought. In other words, they guide the individual to have certain types of experiences that provide them with the opportunity for that immediate gratification that feels good.
Well, yes and no.
Okay, is there direct contact with the individual from the metaphysical?
In their sleep,
In their sleep, okay.
when you're in a neutral sort of environment and you release your stresses from the day and your guards and your ability to discern what's right and what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But you incarnate prone to one way or the other. So in a sleep state, you're relatively neutral, but if you're already prone to being service to self, then it's easy to manipulate that individual because they have lost the discernment.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sleep state, you lessen that discernment.
Okay. In the history of the Earth experience, it's my understanding that such physical anomalies like the Easter Island statues and the lines, what are called the lines of Nazca, were physically created by service to self before they left physical contact with the human population in order to provide reminders of their presence. In other words, as intimidation items.
Yes.
Was Stonehenge also part of that?
Yes, it was. Because all of those particular statues, they're very ritualistic like.
Right.
And so they were designed to instill fear upon whomever saw them, discovered them, walked across the land, because they infiltrated the land as well.
Right.
So they were designed to instill fear and awe in those that saw them. And so when those individuals saw them, they immediately retracted and got scared. And so that fear emanated from their bodies.
Okay. And that was helpful to the service to self to extract the necessary energy that they needed.
Yes.
And so it was kind of like a perpetual monitor for them to use to extract energy.
Yes. It was almost like a buffet.
Okay.
We use her words.
Yes, I like your analogy.
We use her words.
So they set up a buffet on Earth.
Yeah. Yeah. It was almost like a buffet. And so, that provided a lot of energy and stimulus and fear. And on your boxy TV thing, they talk about those particular places frequently. And those that watch it continue to feed into that.
Okay.
If they're fearful. If they're not fearful, then
it doesn't have an effect.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Okay. Well, we've talked about the Middle East being a service to self portal for a long, long time, thousands of years.
Yes.
And we know from the Ra communication that Ra constructed the pyramids, and I understand that there were at the time 22 pyramids that were actually constructed, with 3 of the major ones. Do you know if is that as accurate? I know the 3 on the Giza pyramid are a Ra construction. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Was the Sphinx also a service to others construction, or was that like the lines of Nazca and the Easter Island fixtures? Was that a service to self creation?
No, the Sphinx was service to others, which is why a good majority of the head got destroyed. Because the people in the region, it irritated them.
Oh, okay.
From an energetic level.
I understand. Okay.
So they were fine with the pyramids. They just would go near them. But the Sphinx had a little more energy behind it. And so that's why its face got destroyed.
Okay.
And so they had to reconstruct that.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't the same as it was before. So then people settled down because the configuration of the face was different.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So the expansion of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia potentially may expand to surrounding countries.
Yes.
Is the expansion that has already been experienced, has that been intentional?
Yes.
It has. Okay, so it wasn't an accident.
No.
Okay. Was this intentional on the part of Russia? Or was it intentional on the part of Ukraine in order to induce others to participate more actively on their side?
No. Ukraine, their populace is very positive.
Mm-hmm.
On the Russia side, their soldiers are under tremendous pressure
Right.
from that Putin individual to do something. So they launched a bomb, but they didn't have the right trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ended up in the wrong place.
Okay.
And so they were under pressure under Putin because if they did not perform and do something, then they could be shot.
Right. Okay. So it was Russia's munitions, their bombs that wandered awry.
They took bombs from Ukrainian bombs. They took them and then they put them in their own launchers and then launched them that way.
I see.
To make it look like that it was the Ukrainians that did it, but the Ukrainians would never have done such a thing.
Yeah, very sneaky.
Yes, but their soldiers were desperate.
Right.
They were very desperate, and they're cold, they're hungry, they miss their families, they want this mess to be over.
Right.
And the majority on both sides want this mess to be resolved. But until these leaders let down their ego and decide to communicate with one another, we just see a further escalation. We don't know for sure, but we see a potentiality for further escalation in the region and other countries being brought into it.
Okay. One other question that is not dealing directly with this, but my perspective is it may be helpful for the listening public to understand how significantly bellicosity has been a part of the Earth experience, in addition to the planetary experiences that preceded the Earth experience. It is my understanding that Atlantis was a continent that existed between what we call North America and Europe, and that because of conflicts between service to self and service to others, the entire continent was sunk or destroyed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and this, by my calculations, this occurred, it concluded, the last of Atlantis sunk beneath the waves of the Atlantic Ocean about 8441 BC, about 10,000 years ago. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It was a very advanced society, as you know. Our channel was on there.
On Atlantis?
Yes.
Okay.
And her job was she likes the water. She likes to swim in the ocean.
Did she surf on Atlantis?
They didn't have waves.
Okay. That was for her edification. I'm sorry. That was an aside. That was just for her edification.
Funny. No, she would dive down, and her job was to make sure that the infrastructure underneath the water was intact.
Okay.
And she and only a few others were willing to dive deep, to hold their breath, to go down 50, 60 feet and inspect.
Okay.
And then come back up and then play in the ocean or whatever with the seaweed.
Yeah.
So.
At the time that all of this occurred, or prior to the time of the actual bellicosity, the service to self factions and the service to other factions were pretty clearly distinguishable within the population?
No.
No. Okay, so they were intermingled,
They were
much as they are now.
Yes, and the populace did not have the awareness to recognize the differentiation between the two.
Much as it is now.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, some things, yes, have not evolved.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, how is our channel doing? Do we have a few more minutes? Or should we adjourn till another time when she's more rested?
We should probably adjourn.
Okay. All right. My friends, it's always delightful to speak with you. I appreciate your concern and your sharing of your wisdom with us.
Thank you.